They crowned him the king of American comedy, a truth-teller who wielded humor like a blade, slicing through pretense to reveal raw honesty. Chris Rock, with his razor-sharp wit, didn't just make the world laugh, he forced it to think. From the gritty streets of Brooklyn, where poverty and pain were his first teachers, he rose to etch his name among the immortals of comedy. With 4 Emmys, 3 Grammys, and a legacy that reshaped humor's purpose, he turned laughter into a mirror for society's soul. For over 3 decades, he commanded stages, his voice a mix of confession and redemption, resonating with a generation. But behind the spotlight, his story was no fairy tale. It was a gauntlet of personal battles, a broken marriage, media tempests, and a solitude so profound even his loudest jokes couldn't mask it. If you see Chris Rock as a singular voice of courage and candor, drop a like, a nod to the man who brought joy while carrying invisible scars. His voice, now legendary, was forged in silence. The world would one day echo with his laughter, but as a boy, all he knew was the sound of rejection. Every quiet moment shaped him, each day a fragile dream fighting to endure. Born on February 7, 1965, in Andrews, South Carolina, Chris was the eldest of 7. His parents, Julius and Rosalie Rock, fled the South's red clay for Brooklyn, New York, chasing a promise that often lied. They settled in Bedford-Stuyvesant, where sirens drowned out lullabies and winters clawed through thin walls. Julius toiled as a truck driver and newspaper deliverer, his hands rough with labor's toll. Rosalie taught preschool by day and tended to broken families as a social worker by night. Their small apartment smelled of sweat and chalk, hope and hardship sharing a cramped kitchen. At night, Rosalie stitched torn clothes under a flickering bulb while Julius counted pennies, each clink a reminder of survival's edge. Laughter from wealthier homes drifted through cracked windows, a melody not meant for them. At 10, a desegregation program bused Chris to a school across town, promising equality but delivering cruelty. One of the only black kids among white faces, he faced taunts and fists daily. He tied his shoes tight, as if knots could hold his spirit together, navigating hallways like war zones without armor. The laughter he heard wasn't kind. It cut. He hid the bruises from his parents, carrying them like secrets. By 13, he learned silence was safer than truth. He walked fast, spoke little, and used humor as a shield, a skill that would become his art. "I thought it was normal," he later said. "I thought that's just what life was." Brooklyn in the 1970s was no haven. Smoke and rain in the air, streetlights flickering over broken pavement. Yet in that chaos, Chris found rhythm, turning insults and long walks into lessons in timing and survival. By 18, he'd lived a lifetime of pain, wearing laughter like a second skin. He worked odd jobs, flipping burgers, mopping floors, saving coins for comedy club tickets he was too young to buy. He'd linger outside, catch a rising star, eavesdropping on laughter through walls. In therapy years later, he'd confess, "I learned to laugh before I learned to breathe. Comedy was my survival." From that silence, a voice emerged, forged in hurt, sharpened by humor, destined to make the world listen. That voice, born of struggle, fought to be heard. At 18, Chris stepped into a world that offered no stage, only uncertainty. New York streets were his proving ground, laughter his only defense. He lived in a tiny room where the radiator groaned and heat often failed. On freezing nights, he slept in his coat, counting ceiling cracks to drown out hunger. By day, he scrubbed diner floors, the stench of grease clinging to him. He delivered food to warm offices, then rode the subway back to solitude. At night, he took to basement stages, gripping microphones that screeched, performing in smoky rooms reeking of stale beer. The pay was a pittance, sometimes a drink, sometimes $1, and the booze were free. Crowds ignored or heckled him, their footsteps echoing as they left. Under neon exit signs, he stood alone, wondering if he'd ever be the draw. Some nights, too broke to go home, he rode the subway till dawn, writing jokes between shivers. I told jokes to keep from crying, he later said. I wasn't trying to be funny. I was trying to stay alive. Winters bit hard, the East River's wind slicing through his thin jacket. Meals were often a single pizza slice, breakfast a hope. Yet his notebook overflowed with every rejection turned to words. He performed in dive bars and open mics, the microphone his only confidant. I bombed so bad, he laughed years later. I thought the mic hated me. But he kept returning, his jokes growing sharper, his voice steadier. In 1986, fate arrived in the form of Eddie Murphy, who saw not polish but potential in a scrawny kid bombing at a club. At 21, Chris landed a small role in Beverly Hills Cop 2, a paycheck that felt like salvation. The boy who'd whispered pain into notebooks was now speaking to cameras, turning survival into art. The spotlight hit like a storm. Cameras flashed, blinding him with dreams he'd chased through hunger and humiliation. Success felt foreign on skin used to struggle. Crowds chanted his name, but the echo of empty rooms lingered. Hollywood's doors opened, but its warmth stayed locked. Roles were small, competition fierce, every laugh hard-won. You don't make it here, he'd say. You survive it. In 1990, Saturday Night Live thrust him into Studio 8's glare, where laughter was currency and silence was defeat. The writer's room was a war zone of coffee, smoke, and panic, where every joke was a fight for airtime. You either kill or you die, he recalled. Fame felt like battle. When SNL ended in 1993, silence returned, heavy with doubt. He walked New York's rainy streets, seeing his reflection in dark storefronts, too known to quit, too broke to rest. So he hit the road. Buses, motels, crackling mics, performing for handfuls of people, bleeding truth. In 1996, Bring the Pain ignited like wildfire, its raw honesty earning 2 Emmys and redefining comedy. But acclaim demanded more, louder, faster, funnier. When they call you the best, he said, you stop sleeping, scared they'll see you're not. The late 90s blurred into tours, airports, and exhaustion. Bigger and Blacker, 1999, and Never Scared, 2004, cemented his fearless image, but behind it was a man burning out to keep the world laughing. Some nights, after ovations, he sat alone under fluorescent lights, hands trembling. The Chris Rock Show, 1997 to 2000, wielded truth like a scalpel, interviewing stars and politicians with piercing wit. Everybody Hates Chris, 2005 to 2009, turned his childhood pain into a masterpiece, though editing it kept him awake, rewriting his life frame by frame. Films like Head of State, 2003, and I Think I Love My Wife, 2007, faltered, their failures whispering in Hollywood's quiet. Success doesn't shield you, he said. It just makes the fall louder. He could have stopped, wealthy and revered, but truth drove him. In 2016, Netflix offered $40 million for Tambourine, 2018, a raw confession of failure and fear that felt like healing. Selective Outrage, 2023, Netflix's first live global special, turned humiliation into poetry, proving he wasn't fighting anymore. He was transcending. Every stage was paid for with silence, every trophy with sleepless nights. On March 27, 2022, at the Oscars, the world froze. Chris, sharp and confident, joked about Jada Pinkett Smith. Then Will Smith strode forward, his face taut with rage, and slapped him. The crack echoed louder than laughter, stunning millions. Chris stood still, a faint smile hiding shock. Wow, he said softly, his discipline a shield. The moment became history, anger versus grace. Backstage, he touched his cheek, not in pain but disbelief. The world erupted, but Chris stayed silent, his calm louder than the noise. You don't fight fire with fire, he'd later say. You wait for the smoke to clear. His brother Tony roared in his defense, his love turning to headlines. Will, clutching his Oscar, faced a hollow victory, later apologizing with trembling remorse. In 2023, selective outrage turned that night into art, not revenge, earning applause for resilience. Before the spotlight, there was deeper pain. In 1988, at 23, Chris lost his father, Julius, to a failed ulcer surgery. The call shattered him, the hospital's antiseptic smell replacing his father's diesel scent. Julius, who'd loved through work, left a void Chris couldn't fill. He'd dreamed of his father's pride, but now that applause would never come. That loss became a shadow in every joke. In 2006, his half-brother Charles succumbed to alcoholism at 52. Quiet and proud, Charles hid his pain in bottles. Chris called, joked, but couldn't save him. The loss deepened his comedy's quiet truths, his stand-up becoming a confession of unspoken pain. In 1997, Chris Farley's death at 33 from addiction hit like a storm. A fellow SNL bad boy, Farley's wild joy masked a lonely heart. He could make the world laugh, but not himself. Chris mourned. In 2008, Bernie Mac's death at 50 from pneumonia closed another chapter. A mentor and brother, Bernie's calm wisdom had anchored Chris. Each loss, father, brother, friends, shaped his art, turning laughter into a tribute to those gone. The deepest wound was his marriage to Malak Compton, met in 1994 amid New York's chaos. Her quiet strength grounded him, their 1996 wedding a private vow. Their daughters, Lola, 2002, and Zara, 2004, brought a new rhythm, fatherhood's gentle symphony. But fame's pull eroded their bond. Tours, absences, and infidelity, admitted in Tambourine, broke their 20-year marriage by 2016. I wasn't a good husband, he confessed, therapy revealing his habit of hiding behind humor. They chose grace, sharing custody, living miles apart. Chris showed up for his daughters, proving love endures in responsibility. At 60, with a $60 million net worth, Chris lives in Alpine, New Jersey, his 10,300 square foot home a sanctuary of memories. His Brooklyn carriage house, bought early, grounds him. His garage, Rolls-Royce, Lamborghini, Tesla, Range Rover, reflects his journey. Lola studies in Paris, Zara at USC, both close to their father. Diagnosed with NVLD in 2020, he embraced therapy, finding humor in his struggles. Everybody Still Hates Chris, 2024, reimagines his youth, a hit bridging generations. A new film, where he acts and directs, promises intimacy and truth. He gives quietly to education and women's causes, slipping into clubs for unscripted sets. His comedy, now softer, carries compassion born of loss. Greatness isn't never breaking, he says. It's rebuilding with love. In his daughter's voices, calling Dad, lives his truest applause, proof that even broken things can heal.